I'm Brother Warren Longo. I'm an Alexian brother, and I've been an Alexian brother for 60 years. The Alexian Brothers is not a well-known congregation, but we have been in existence for 800 years, and our history is one of helping those that are the most unwanted. Blatty had just come out with the book and then the movie in the 70s called The Exorcist. And it was the talk throughout the United States, in fact, because it was about an exorcism that was based on a true story. And it happened, of course, that they had a seminar at Mundelein College, and I was asked because they found out that I was an Alexian brother and that the Alexian brothers were somehow associated with the exorcism that took place in St. Louis in 1949. One of the reasons why I know the history so well is because I have a case study that was done by Father Bishop, who helped Father Bordern, who was the exorcism, keeping track of what was happening. I became in possession of the diary probably around 1968, and that was when one of our brothers in Chicago left Chicago, and I took his place. And so I took his office, took it over, and one day, I think it was maybe after 3 or 4 or 5 months, in the very bottom of the drawer, must have slipped underneath the drawer, I was cleaning the drawer out very carefully, and I saw something like a paper. So I really grabbed it, and it was this case study. It's in our archives, but this is an exact duplicate of it. After Blatty wrote the book, as I say, there was a great interest, and even today, whenever I ask the people, I've been in St. Louis for 25 years, whenever I ask what I do orientation of our new employees, I ask them, what do you know, anything you know about Alexian brothers, and especially those here in St. Louis, and inevitably there'll be someone who say, well, my grandmother or my grandfather talked about an exorcism. And I said, yep, I guess that's what we're noted for, is the exorcism. And I would like to emphasize the ministry of the brothers in this whole phenomenon. The exorcism, by the way, took place in 1949. That's where it began. And it began in January of 1949 in Mount Rainier, Maryland, where this young boy, which we call, and in all of, by the way, this case study, Brother Cornelius was you might say, superior or rector of the administrator of the hospital, and it's right on the property that I'm living on. It was in the old hospital, and he got a call in which he was requested by Father Bordern to have this young boy, and he called him Robbie, to be hospitalized because there was a lot of things happening to the boy, and even though he was doing the exorcism previously, the boy wasn't getting the rest, and he needed to have supervision in terms of his physical needs as well as his psychological needs and his spiritual needs while the exorcism was going on, which is a series of prayers what the Catholic Church has had for since the year 600, I believe. There's many myths about the exorcist, many myths, but this is the real thing. What happened was in January of 1949, a young boy we call Robbie, the brothers promised we would never give out his name, and they really appreciated that, and we haven't. We've always nicknamed him Robbie. So Robbie was about 15 years old, and he was having his aunt was very much involved in Ouija boards and things like that, and this was around the area of Mount Rainier, Maryland. And so so he got sort of interested in these Ouija boards, and after she died, Aunt Tilly, they called her, after she died, He was living in the same house with his grandmother. And one evening in January of, as I say, 1949, they both heard a scratching sound like there was mice or something scratching in the house. And they saw a picture of Jesus sort of move around, shaking like. And they thought, well, what's happening behind the wall? And they checked. There was nothing. It was in another room, but just some strange things were happening. And when he went to bed, he heard some clawing marks, and he didn't know what to think about that. And so he informed his mother and his family that these strange things are happening, and they also were witnessing these very strange things, especially at night. During the day he was okay, but it was at night where they kept on hearing this clawing kind of stuff and some odd things going on, things going across the room, levitating on their own. And so they called their minister, who was a Lutheran minister, and they told him what was happening. So the minister, I believe the minister brought him to his own home and put him into a guest room and just observed him, because they thought if he took him out of the environment, maybe everything would be okay. Well, it wasn't, because he heard the same things. As he sat there on a chair while he watched him, Robbie, he saw Robbie twisting and saying things and hearing scratching sounds on the mattress. Things were going across the room. And he said, oh my gosh, he said, so the next day when we saw his parents, he said, let me tell you something. The Catholic Church has special prayers for devil possession, which we don't have. And I would advise you to go to St. James, which is the nearby Catholic church, and talk to the priest there and see what he has to say, because they do have this ancient rite of exorcism, these special prayers that they say. So that's what the parents did, and so the priest, in fact, did the same thing. The priest of St. James Parish, he went, but he observed Robbie in Robbie's home, and he just sat in a chair and he observed Robbie in the evening, and it was very similar to what the Lutheran pastor had seen. Strange phenomenon happening, scratching and all kinds of odd things, and him screaming and even saying some words in Latin, which he didn't think he knew, because he didn't take up Latin in school. And so he reported to the parents, Robbie's parents, that yes, there was something going on, and that he maybe should get the right of permission to do the exorcism. But before that happened, a few evenings after that, Robbie was in the morning, he was in the bathroom, and all of a sudden he screamed because he saw in the mirror in the bathroom sort of scratched on his skin, L-O-U-I-S, Lewis. And he's screaming, and his mother stormed into the bathroom. What's going on? And he said, this is on my body. And she looked at it. She said, oh my gosh. And then it dawned on her, maybe this is a sign. Maybe we need to go to St. Louis, get out of this environment, get out of this house, because they had relatives in St. Louis. So, in fact, Belle Noire, which is a northern suburb of St. Louis, they had relatives. So that's what they did. They took the boy and they went to St. Louis, Belle Noire, and thought maybe this was going to be the end of it. But again, the same thing started to happen. And it so happened that one of the relatives in Belle Noire of the boy was going to St. Louis University. So she said that she would go to the head of St. Xavier Church, which is the college church of St. Louis University College Church, and talk to the rector there, or the pastor there, about what was happening, to see what advice he could give. And it happened to be Father Bodern. And Father Bodern was an elderly man. He was a very down-to-earth person. And she told him about this, and he said, well, let me go out there and just take a look. So he did the same thing as the others did and saw that strange things were happening. And he said, wow, the boy would be spitting and all kinds of stuff. And so he said, well, there's something going on here. And so he said, I think I'm going to see the Cardinal Carberry, and see what he says about this, and maybe he can appoint an exorcism priest to do this, who's got some experience in this area. And it was up to the Cardinal Carberry then, when he reported what he had seen, that Cardinal Carberry, he thought maybe the Cardinal would say, well, I'm going to put so-and-so, because I believe every diocese has somebody who is trained to be an exorcist, I believe. And today, at least, I think that's the case. And but he said that Father Bodern was supposed to do it. Bodern was a very wise, down-to-earth, wise man. He had a lot of wisdom, and I think Cardinal Carberry did the right thing. And so he began to perform the rite of exorcism in the home, and he even took him to the rectory and did the same, and things were getting out of hand again. He was spitting. He would spit at the priest. He would spit at all those that were surrounding him, and he would aim it just perfectly. And things were going across the room, and odd things were happening, and you could hear some scratching, and he would say some really bad cuss words that would come out of a 14, 15-year-old guy, a kid. And by the way, he was examined back in Mount Rainier, and the doctor didn't find anything wrong with him, because it seemed like during the day he seemed to be more normal than at night. So finally it came to a point, this was in March, that Father Bodern said, we can't continue. The family's getting tired. Everybody's getting tired. This boy needs to be put into a hospital. They tried, by the way, to put him in a hospital when he was in Mount Rainier area, but every hospital said no. They said they just didn't want anything to do with it. But he said, I know a hospital here in St. Louis that will take the boy, because they are noted for taking anybody that nobody else will take. And so Father Bodern called Brother Cornelius, who happened to be the rector of the hospital, and said, I have this boy. We're performing an exorcism on him, but he should be put in your psychiatric department, because he needs physical care, spiritual care, around-the-clock care, and we just cannot provide that. And he needs to be around the clock, and it's wearing the parents out for him to continue to be with him, and so this will give them some rest at the same time. And so Brother Cornelius, without any hesitation, said, sure, bring the boy here. So they brought the boy to the 5th floor we had 3 floors of psychiatric patients at the old hospital on Broadway, which now we have a new hospital on Broadway, which is not ours, by the way. Alexian Brothers sold it some 15, 20 years ago. But it was the old hospital, and we had a wing of psychiatric care, and it was there that Father Bodern continued with the exorcism. One of the brothers who just died about 3 years ago, who was one of the brothers that participated in the exorcism, on his deathbed, he asked that some documentary be done to really show the Alexian brothers, because not much has been said about the Alexian brothers and their role in this exorcism. A lot about the Jesuits, which is fine, but not very much about the Alexian brothers' role. Brother John Grider, who passed away about 3 years ago, was one of the brothers that took care of him. And the brothers took care of him 24 hours a day, around the clock. The brothers took turns. One of the brothers that was really a favorite of Robbie was Brother Emmett. Brother Emmett was a very a nice guy. You couldn't help but like the guy. And brother would take him even outside, even though it was March, It was around the Lenten season. Even though, just to get him outside a little bit, and the boy appreciated Brother taking him out, getting him out of the building. Of course, he would be there to supervise him. And in fact, at one point, the boy began to run a little bit, and Brother Emmett, huffing and puffing, got caught up to him and said, no, you got to stay with me. I have a responsibility of making sure you remain safe. One of the things that was very popular in 1949, I know that in 1949, I myself was an 11-year-old. And I remember very, very well that there was great devotion to Our Lady of Fatima. Brother Cornelius, the superior of the hospital, the rector of the hospital, he bought for the intercession of Our Lady of Fatima. Because Mary, according to our Catholics, is a very powerful intercessor for us. And so he put it in the lobby of the hospital, and and we still have it. And the brothers, around the clock, not only did they care for him physically, his physical needs, changing the bed, helping him to the bathroom or whatever he needed, but they also they saw the phenomenon that was happening. For example, they saw dishes flying across the room when they brought the tray. And they saw him shouting and screaming and spitting at them. And boy, did he have a good aim. He would spit right in the face of the priest or right in the face of the brothers. And at one time he fell out of bed during one of his sort of convulsions, you might say, and the brother had to help him get up, and he slung at the brother and all kinds of things. So the brothers were very much involved. It was about Holy Week. It was March, and he had been in the hospital for about 3 weeks, and now it was Holy Week. And at this time, Brother Cornelius brought a statue, this is a picture of it, of St. Michael the Archangel. And St. Michael is noted to kill the dragon, which is basically to kill evil, to kill the lack of goodness, to kill evil, to kill darkness. And so he put this on his bedside stand, this Archangel, Michael the Archangel statue, which is now in our archives in Chicago. And Father Baudouin and the priests that were there, and the brothers too, they all felt that this was Holy Week, and that it was at this time that probably the prayers of exorcism would take effect. And because they were very hopeful, after all, and so came Good Friday, Holy Saturday, and nothing happened. And by the way, these prayers were always done in the evening, because that's when he would almost change his personality. And they were done in the evening. And then it was Easter, or Holy Saturday evening, Easter morning, nothing happened. And so I think the brothers and the priests were disappointed, because they thought for sure Easter Sunday, the resurrection, that this would take place, that the prayers would be effective. Well, so they did the same thing on Monday. April the 17th of 1949 was Easter. And so they thought this was going to work out real good. Well, nothing happened. And so that night, Easter night, nothing happened. And so they said, well, we're going to come back Monday. So Monday evening, Father Baudouin came back, and it was a very interesting evening, because it was that evening at 10:45 p.m. in the midst of Father saying the prayers that, I will quote it, and it's quoted in here, and it's quoted in its very exact quote. Now again, this is Easter Monday of 1949, April 18th. Father Baudouin kept reciting in his new quiet voice. Robbie was screaming and arching his body against the torment. Father Bodorn said his last Amen. There came then absolute quiet, a quiet that seemed to fill the room. Father Bishop, who was the one who did the case study and did the journaling, you might say, day to day, surreptitiously checked the time on his watch. It was 10:45 p.m. Suddenly from Robbie came a new voice, a clear, masterful voice, rich and deep. Satan, Satan, I am Saint Michael, and I command you, Satan, and the other evil spirits to leave the body in the name of Dominus. Dominus is a Latin word for God. Immediately, now, now, now. Dominus. That, Father Bodorn realized, was the word that the demon had said that Robbie would never speak. Now began, says Father Bishop's diary, the most violent contortions of the entire period of exorcism. In what Father Bishop believed was the fight to the finish, for 7 or 8 minutes, Robbie screamed and twisted on the bed. Then he calmly said, "He's gone." Robbie looked around at the priests and brothers and said he was feeling fine. And to this day, he doesn't remember a thing that happened. When the devil left him, the moment he left, there was heard like gunshots. Father Bishop said that some of the Jesuits were praying in the college church, and that they, around 10:55 or something, and this happened around 10:45, 10:50 in the evening, a Monday evening, a Monday after Easter, that a light shone, some kind of a light, and they could, it almost looked like a figure of an angel, which they attribute to Saint Michael the Archangel. So frankly, when I go on retreat in Milwaukee, the retreat grounds, which is a sister's convent, has a statue of Saint Michael the Archangel with a spear, and it always, every time I walk by there, which I walk by there every day when I'm on retreat, because I go for my walk, it always reminds me of this story of this exorcism. And we know that he got married and everything was fine. By the way, him and his family turned Catholic. They weren't pressured whatsoever. They wanted to turn Catholic. And Robbie received his Holy Communion during Holy Week, during the day, because it was a good time to do it, because he was sort of a little more normal. I know that Robbie communicated with Brother Emmett, and then Brother Emmett passed away quite a few years ago, and after that, none of the brothers had heard. And he doesn't remember any of that period, which is good, because that could be haunting you, but he was never haunted by that. The church's stance is they believe that evil can possess somebody, but at the same time, we also understand there's a lot of fake devil possession too. The new hospital was built in 1978 here in St. Louis, and the old hospital was being knocked down. And Brother Thomas, before the wrecking crane was going to come the next day, the day before they came, the area where the exorcism took place, and by the way, that room was never used again for any patient. It was really a storage room. He went up and saw the room that was going to be knocked down, bulldozed the next day, and he saw that there had been a witchcraft or something. There was all kinds of candles and things like that, and writing on the walls. So somebody had a seance, you might say, there. The room was used, but it was never used for a patient. A good friend of mine, he worked in the receiving room. And in fact, I remember him saying that one day he went in there and he accidentally locked himself in. He was scared because he locked himself in the very room because he was putting some storage in there. and he forgot about the fact that he should have not have closed the door because it locked of itself. Even to this day, uh, especially around Halloween, there's someone that comes to the hospital and say, "Is this where the famous exorcism took place?" And the lady at the front desk has to usually say to him, "Yes, but this is not the hospital because the hospital has been knocked down in 1978, and the new hospital is 1978. So the exorcism took place in 1949. So, there was a lot of, even a friend of mine who told me that he lived in the neighborhood here, and the kids, when he was a little kid, they all had all these myths about a green scum coming down from the fifth floor and all kinds of happenings, and that is not the case. None of the brothers had any bad experiences after the exorcism. No, they, in fact, they had a good experience with the family because the family was so grateful. And certainly Robbie was extremely grateful to the brothers for helping him and for housing him and for all that they did for him around the clock. The church certainly recognized that there can be a possession, but at the same time, I think the church knows that it could be something psychologically, because there's a lot of things that we don't know today that we will know 20 years from now about the human mind, about the human brain, and about how we can be obsessed with something. And this could be, and the church would have no problem with that. I believe that the brothers, although they are open to the phenomenon of things we don't understand about the human mind and all that, that we might understand 20 years from now, but that those that really saw it have said to me when I was a young brother that they believe that this was a true devil possession from what they had seen, because there was just too many things that happened, telling even some secrets that a person had that how would he know that? Well, he didn't know these. He didn't know the priests and stuff like that. So I would say that I can lean either way, but with the brothers, with their testimony, I would believe that this is one of the cases where it was probably a true possession. I think the brothers believe that something demonic happened, and it's especially the older brothers, but they too are open to, it could be another explanation. They're very open that they think that this was probably so because of the testimony of what I have seen and what some of the older brothers, there's three of us older brothers here that have heard testimony from the brothers who have passed away. After this happened, several of our brothers were so affected by this that they left the community to go to a more stricter monastic community. One of them, who I met, went to Gethsemane, to the monks, the Trappists of Gethsemane, and he had witnessed this, and he had affected so much that he wanted to dedicate his entire life to God and prayer. And that's what he did for the rest of his life. He died at Gethsemane quite a few years ago, but he gave his whole life. He just transferred himself from our more active community to a very monastic community that prays all day long. So that's how it affected him. Most organizations, whether they are whether they are religious or secular organizations, have a 200-year life cycle and then they go out of existence. Why are we on our fourth life cycle? It's because if you want to remain, you have to do two things. Keep loyal to your values and reinvent yourself. So after the bubonic plague, which passed over the Rhineland, the brothers then looked around and said, what is the great need now? Who were called at that time the Begards. And they found out that people with mental illness, because people with mental illness were looked upon as demon-possessed. They thought there were demons in them. And nobody wanted to touch them, but the brothers did what nobody else wanted to do. And that is why when Brother Bonaventure Thalen came to St. Louis in 1869, he not only set up a hospital for medical surgical patients, but he had a wing for the mentally ill patients, and that is exactly where Robbie was set up, in a private room there. Christopher Kaufman, who was the historian from St. Louis University, did our history, and he went into our archives of Europe, and he said he was amazed because the brothers were involved in helping the criminally insane, helping witches. There were so-called witches, which they were not, who were being burned at the stake, and the brothers were the ones that try to give them peace, that try to get near them and pray with them, because after all, we know today that they weren't witches at all. They were doing herbal medicine, and they were women who probably had those like extrasensory perception, and so the brothers took care of them. And then in our own day, I remember very well when the brothers decided in 1986 at one of our big meetings that the plague of the 1980s was AIDS at that time. And so the plague, which we did in the 1300s, was now a new plague of the 1980s, and so we opened up a home for people who were living with AIDS, and because nobody else would really do it. And we're, I think, one of the first Catholic organizations to do that, and we still have that going. And right now we are going through another life cycle, and we're dealing with prisoners. We're dealing with with those with addictions and all the rest of those kind of things which are plaguing our present society. All I want to say is that in this whole thing, whether you believe or don't believe in the devil, that's not, to me, that's not important. We all believe in evil. There is evil. We see it every day. We see it in the bombings. We see it in the torturing. We see it in the shootings at schools and terrorist attacks. We see it every day. But this indicates that good can overcome evil. Good can overcome evil. And it did. The brothers worked very hard day and night, and they didn't do it with a lot of fanfare or a lot of publicity. They did it with the kindness of their heart. I'm very proud to be a part of that tradition that to this very day does exactly what we've done since the bubonic plague, which is to help the most vulnerable, the most unwanted, and the most outcast persons in society.